Hello, this is Steve Lentini, and I'm your host for the podcast, Different Thinking for Different Times. Season 3, Episode 30. I like starting with a quote, as most of you know. And here's one from Bruce Lee. He said, seriously, if you always put limits on what you can do, physical or anything else, it'll spread over into the rest of your life. It'll spread into your work, into your morality, into your entire being. Bruce goes on to say there are no limits. There are plateaus, but you must not stay there. You must go beyond them. A person must constantly exceed their level. So Bruce gives us a glimpse into his own philosophy about limited, small-minded thinking that we all have. I haven't been cured of it. It's a journey, not a destination. But the thing is, most people don't question their thinking. They look at limits, or perhaps they use their thought pattern to limit the possibility of others by judgments, small minded, limited thinking. And then they speak it. And perhaps they speak it at home where they influence their children. So if we're small minded, we're modeling that for our children. Limitless possibilities exist. After all, we live in a mystery. We live in a miracle. But don't take my word for it. Prove it to yourself. Then you own it. Never blindly follow anyone or anything. I mean, we don't have to look far today, but in this country's, the United States, politics is so limited and filled with small-minded people, including our political leaders. They want people to act in different ways, and yet they model small-minded behavior, pointing the finger, selling a version of the truth that they want people to buy. And both sides are wrong. We don't know where the truth is today. Sadly, here's a quote from Ernest Holmes. There are no finalities in any science, any philosophy, or any religion. Through the continual emergence of the creative principle, any last finality proves to be but the beginning of a new creative series. This eternal spiral, finding its base in the everlasting reality, will never cease to emerge. I like the part where he says, but the beginning, any finality proves to be but the beginning of a new creative series. There are no beginnings or endings. It's just an infinite circle. Something ends, something new begins. And we look at that in our seasons. We watch it in front of us every spring. We see things emerge. Summer, they flourish and grow. In the fall, they begin to, besides produce the fruit from their labors, so to speak, they begin to fall apart. So there's the harvest, and then they break apart. The leaves fall, the plant and vegetation fall to the ground for food. It becomes food. The ending appears to be a new beginning for the next year's crop. And then there's winter, which is rest. So the small-minded thinkers, by the way, that's all of us. We all have it. I'm not saying there's one group of people that are small-minded thinkers. Experts are small-minded thinkers. After all, there's many groups of experts. It's funny, during COVID, you only heard about we'll follow the science, but it didn't matter. It depended more on whose science. There were experts on different sides. It's funny that we want to silence people that disagree with us, and that's even occurring in the group of people called big tech, who somehow they've become, I guess, the moderators of conscious thought. Wow. Very small-minded. Allowing people to have different ideas, and I don't espouse that people should post things that are totally false, but valid opposing opinions, especially coming from different doctors, different medical doctors, different experts, virologists, biologists. I mean, there were all kinds of opposing points of view. And it's very small minded that humanity has come to the point where we make others wrong who disagree. So, the minister that wrote in this month's Science of Mind, Dr. Raymond Anderson, wrote the following: "We know the truth of our being is limitless." Well, some of us know that. And I have to think about it too. Yet we are limited in certain ways. Like the number 2 is limited in what it is. We are bound within a certain range of what is ours to do. The number 2 is not expected to be a 7. And I, meaning the Reverend, is not expected to be an Olympic athlete or an Indian yogi. But when that 2 is modified by adding a 5, it becomes a 7. Flour by itself is flour, but add eggs and sugar and it becomes cookies or cake, just as clay becomes cups, saucers, and sculptures. When we act in concert with the other expressions of God, we take that limit and turn it on its head. We find that in reality, what was perceived as a limit is actually a limit only when viewed from one small vantage point. He goes on to share more in that piece he wrote. I can tell you, though, it's a great piece, that segment, on when we are acting alone or when we're acting as small-minded, believing one way, following something blindly. We don't become powerful. We only become more powerful when we add in the inclusion of others who think and look and decide differently than we do. Imagine everyone being the same. That would be sad. Then there would be no point to this existence because there would be no growth. We need to come to a place where we become more limitless, broad-minded, infinite in our thinking. Go back to other productions of this podcast and you'll hear where I base it on my near-death experience, my croaking, my what's next experience, because I went from a body to one with everything and nothing, one with the infinite. And none of our small-minded thinking goes with us, at least not with me. None of the judgments, nothing from here was there. We just become part of this infinite creation, and we can view our lives differently if we just learn to live and look at every moment as divine, and especially all of those things that upset us and the people that upset us. They're actually a gift. That's the universe itself, the life force itself, the divine, the creation, God, the Buddha, the Christ, the Abraham, the Muhammad. It doesn't matter. They all came. If you study the thread that runs between them was for us to embrace this life. It's the aberrations or the extreme that want everyone to think like them. And so you have even Protestants and Catholics fighting each other throughout history. Same faith, same God, same Savior. Same with the Muslim faith. Same with different Orthodox faith in the Jewish religion. Each side finds ways, small-minded ways, to make each other wrong, and then to try to make the rest of the population wrong. Because what created an infinite universe chose us. We're the selected ones. Well, I wrote the book, You Might Be Full of Shit If, and we're all full of shit somewhere. We have to develop a sense of humor about ourselves and look for how we can grow and learn from others. When I passed from my body into what's next, there were no sexual preferences, no sexes. Everything was one. There was no male or female. There were no religions, no nationalities, certainly no political parties. Talk about small-minded. And that's in every country, in all of us. I'm starting a new podcast soon in November. It's based on my book, You Might Be Full of Shit If. And from time to time, I'll use the other book, You Might Be Full of Number Two. After All We Know Better, the woke edition. And I make fun of all sides that believe they've got it, including me. I'm questioning myself. My answers questioned, as Osho wrote. Your answers questioned. That's the kind of life that will deliver growth. Look at Ernest Holmes, where he said that God is all and in every moment. And he left enough room to be wrong. All he said was prove it to yourself, which is what I say. Live by leaving behind small-minded thinking. And I'm glad to have you as a guest on this podcast, and on my next one, You Might Be Full of Shit If. You can find my book on Amazon. Just Google Steve Lentini in books. So guests on this podcast, just remember, if you want to be a guest, I might ask you, does that sound like small-minded thinking? We live in a mystery, a miracle, something infinite, and yet we believe we think like the creator of that. It's been said that the creator is greater than its creation, and that's true for all of us, and that's true for this existence. It's imperfect, so we can learn to grow by accepting all of our differences and looking at the people that bug us. And really, the only journey that's any of your business is your own. Other people's journeys are none of your business. If you want to be on the podcast, Steve at stevelentini.com. That's Steve at Steve. L is in Linda, E-N is in Nancy, T is in Tom, INI.com. Glad to have you. Remember, like I said, I might ask you, does that sound like you're full of shit? Or does that sound like small-minded thinking? And remember, I admit I have it, and somewhere I'm full of shit, and I don't care anymore. I'm just grateful to be alive, happy to be a human, and happy to be learning how to accept all the many others that live in this miracle with us. Thanks.